Okay. We're good. I am here with Alexander Mercouris, the Oracle of London, and I'm here with Gonzalo Lira, the Oracle of Kharkiv?
The underground man of Kharkov, I think. Yeah. How's it going, guys? Thank you so much for having me on. It's always
the prophet of Kharkov.
The prophet of
The prophet of Kharkov. You're both witness and predictor. So you're the prophet of Kharkov.
Thank you very much,
yes.
guys.
So
it's
very
always
proud to
a
have
pleasure
you again on our programs.
Oh, thank you so much. That's so kind.
Okay. So let's get started. We'll go for about an hour, and let's keep it open. Let's talk about basically what's going on in Russia, Ukraine. Maybe we'll talk about Biden and Obama and what happened there. And I've titled this live stream. Yeah.
Alex, do you mind if we just dive right into the topic that you were discussing just before we went live about Zelensky's appearance at the Greek Parliament? Because you told me that story, but I haven't caught up with that story. Please fill us in about it.
Yeah, let's dive
not
into
been covered
that.
here in Britain either.
Yes, the title of the stream is Biden loves Russian oil. We're just poking fun at the fact that the U.S. has increased oil imports of 43%, while the EU is cutting off all their energy from Russia. But anyway, we'll keep it open. We'll talk about what's going on. Just let me say a quick hello to everyone on Rumble, Odyssey, YouTube, and our great community on Locals, the duran.locals.com. And let me just say a quick hello to all of our great moderators. Lady Cosmica Valies is in the house. I think I saw Alan Watson, I believe, was also with us. And I think I also saw Reckless Abandon and maybe Zariel. But thank you very much to our moderators, and whatever questions are sent to us, super chat questions, we will answer everything in a separate live stream, a separate dedicated live stream, because we'll only go for about an hour. But let's jump into it. The only news that I have to give and what we can talk about before we get into other topics is that Zelensky, I don't say the Z word because the Z letter is banned. So Zelensky gave a speech to the Greek Parliament. And he talked about 300 Thermopylae. He actually brought that up. He talked about the Greek diaspora in Mariupol and Odessa. But the big controversy, the big mess up from the Mitsotakis government is that during Zelensky's presentation, his theater show, because that's what it is. It really is theatrics. He brought in two guys to speak that were fighting against the Russians. The problem with these guys is that they were part of the Azov, and various party members, MPs in other parties, not from the New Democracy, they walked out. There was outrage. They're making statements to the press saying, how dare you bring NAZIs into the Greek Parliament to speak? And they are blasting the Mitsotakis government. It is absolutely shameful to watch NAZIs speak in the Greek Parliament. I mean, this is a PR nightmare for Greece. Anyone that's not familiar with Greek history, Greeks suffered greatly in World War II, and we were occupied by the NAZIs from 1941 to 44. I believe Alexander could probably give some more insight there, some more context there. But anyway, that's all I have to say. It was a complete nightmare for the Greek government, and very distressing and shameful to have had this happen inside the Greek Parliament. By the way, many MPs did clap after the presentation, which is even more distressing. That's all I have to say. Alexander
This
Gonzalo.
happened today or yesterday?
This was I believe this morning. I believe is when it took place. This morning, yesterday afternoon. Yeah.
Yeah, because I didn't catch it on my feed. That's why I'm kind of surprised.
I think it was this morning that he spoke.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
It hasn't been.
I found it outrageous, extraordinary, stupid.
Guys, the Greek media
and terrible.
The mainstream Greek media is not reporting on this. You're getting all of this from the alternative Greek media.
Oh, really? So the straight press in Greece is just memory holding this whole situation.
Memory holding.
That's outrageous.
Memory holding it.
Memory holding.
Almost worse.
He's very controlled.
These guys. Good God. I mean, this is supposed to be a free...
no different.
Sorry. Go ahead.
I mean, Gonzalo, it is every bit as controlled in Greece as you'll find in any other part of Europe now. I mean, in fact, it's controlled by a small group of immensely rich and very powerful and very well-connected people with rigidly Atlanticist views, and you could call them oligarchs because that's what they are. So it's an oligarch media, the mainstream media in Greece. There is a thriving alternative news system, and of course, Greece is small, and much of the population, half the population, lives in Athens. And it's a gregarious society, so people do talk to each other, and news circulates and spreads. But the mainstream media in Greece would certainly not cover a thing like that.
Anyway, that's the news from here.
For too many Greeks. Yeah.
That's the news from here. What do you guys want to talk about, Alexander, Gonzalo?
Well, perhaps Gonzalo, we can start by telling us how you are, because obviously we've been hearing lots of stories about Kharkiv. I mean, the Russians never said they were pulling away from the areas around Kharkiv, and there's reports that there's a build-up of Russian forces around Kharkiv. There's even stories that the Russians are going to do something big around Kharkiv. I'm not sure how much credence to give to these things. I'm not a military person anyway. I would have thought that their major priority at the moment would be Donbass, and I would have thought that those forces that are in Kharkiv region will probably be committed to Donbass rather than Kharkiv itself. But, who am I to say these things? How are you?
I'm doing very well. Thank you very much for asking. And just want to say hi to the chat. I hope you guys are doing well. I'll tell you right now that this is my understanding. And I'll tell you what I understand at this time and what I'm observing. At this time, I understand that the Russians have essentially pulled out of the Kiev area and Chernihiv area in the north center of Ukraine, and they have rerouted those forces for the big battle for the Donbass around Kramatorsk. That's supposed to be the Kramatorsk-Donetsk line is more or less where the battle is going to take place. I mean, after the fact, they'll give it a name of whatever small hamlet or town is the epicenter of the battle, but that seems to be where the encirclement is taking place.
Yes.
It seems that encirclement is pretty much complete or are in the process of being completed. As a practical matter, it's inevitable because they've destroyed the fuel depots, the munitions depots, even the refineries. And so the possibility of that large army of between 60,000 and I hear numbers all over the place. Nobody seems to have like a real number. I hear 60,000 to 100,000 fighters. Let's just take 60,000. That would represent the bulk of the Ukrainian army. And that main army, that main battle seems to be the battle that they're getting ready to fight. And after this, the big battle after that would be, as I understood it, would be Nikolaev. That would be the next one, the next item on the Russians' list. Now, something I've been following very closely is the morale of the Russians, the Russian people and the political leadership. And even people who are anti-Putin and sort of like, neoliberal, kind of like right on down the line, they are all reporting from Russia, and I'm getting this from my own sources as well, that people in Russia are 100% behind this. Even people who were previously very critical of Putin, in Russia, there is a sense that let's get this done. Like a hard charging kind of, they hate us because I think that the sanctions and the whole Russophobia thing just blew up in the face of the West, because the Russians are realizing they hate us. So, let's, and our government, who's been telling us this for years, they were right. So let's get behind this war. So anyway, about the war, it's going to happen, the encirclement. There isn't going to be, any kind of, dithering or dawdling because the Russian people are behind it. And so if anything, any setback, it'll be pour more soldiers in, make it happen. And after that, it'll be Nikolaev, where there's going to be another big pocket. And my sense at this time is that if the Nikolaev pocket, the big cauldron around Kramatorsk, if that gets done, or when that gets done, then the issue is focusing on Nikolaev. And it's very possible that by the time the Russian army focuses on Nikolaev, the Ukrainian armed forces will have collapsed. The one after Nikolaev is supposed to be Kharkov. That is, they take care of Kramatorsk. If they have fighting in Nikolaev, they take care of Nikolaev, and after that, Kharkov. But so that's why I'm thinking that there isn't going to be a major battle, block by block here in Kharkov. But I could be fooling myself. So, the last thing I want to point out, I have been noticing an increase in shelling. There's just more shelling, and it's becoming more relentless. But it's distant. I mean, from the center, I would say it's 10 kilometers, maybe 7 kilometers and out. Okay. I would not be able to tell you exactly the direction. From maps I have seen, it seems clear that Kharkov is in the middle of completely Russian controlled territory.
Yeah.
And that's what I know at this time.
Well, Gonzalo, can I just follow up on some of your points, with all of which, by the way, I should tell you straight away, I agree. It's always a little awkward to say that, when one is in a dialogue with someone, that one agrees with them, because, sometimes that can sound like, where it's a dialogue, it's not really a dialogue anymore. But anyway, I do agree with you, and I agree with every point you've made. And I would like to just illustrate the first point about morale in Russia. Now, my wife, who's an academic, is in contact with an agency in Britain that is involved with academic exchanges in Russia. Now, I don't want to name the name of this organization. I don't want to cause any problems or embarrassments to people. But I do know that they have been conducting contacts with the various academics. These are all, I should say, humanities academics in Russian universities. Now, if you know anything at all about Russia and its political system and the political debates that happen there, humanities academics in Russian universities are perhaps the single most solid anti-Putin demographic. They're the people who most value contacts with the West, who like to travel to the West on academic exchanges, who hope to get at some point posts in Western universities, who want all of those sort of things. And of course, bear in mind that they are also the people who are overwhelmingly likely to speak Western languages, English in this particular case, and who therefore are historically, going all the way back to the Soviet period, the ones who have been most open to Western use. And what is being reported back by this agency that arranges these exchanges and contacts, it's a British agency, is that in the first 2 weeks of the war, there was shock amongst this group about what had happened, much criticism of the government and of Putin, and that initially, in fact, within this group, it was, as it always is, extremely difficult to criticize, to support the war, and that those who did support the war found themselves isolated amongst their peers. Over the last few weeks, this has changed completely. And the reason for that is the response of the West, the massive sanctions war, the discrimination against Russians as it's perceived across the West, the enormous attacks on Russians everywhere. And this has caused a massive turnaround and consolidation behind the government amongst this precise group of people, this section of Russian society. Obviously it's small, but this particular section of Russian society, which has historically been most critical of it. So the sanctions war, the media campaign, all of that has had the exact diametric opposite effect to the one that it used to have, was expected to have. It has consolidated Russian society behind the government, and of course they're all in contact with their acquaintances and friends in Ukraine. Many of them have friends in Donbass. They're getting all kinds of information from what's going on in Ukraine, and that's apparently consolidating their support even further. So there's been a big shift, and it basically started around mid-March. So that's what I've heard. Now, obviously, this is secondhand information. It's anecdotal to some extent, but I believe that it is completely true, and it reflects everything that I'm hearing about the mood in Russia. I would also say that just before I came onto this program, I was just reviewing the various parts of the media. I saw that industrial production in Russia in March rose by 4.5%. The ruble, as we speak at the moment, is trading more strongly than it was before the sanctions were imposed. I think the Western powers wildly underestimated the scale and size and diversity of Russian economy, and I think they made the same miscalculation about the mood within Russia itself. So this is early days in the sanctions war. An economic war of attrition is going to be played out over the course of a year, but I get the sense of a darkening public mood in the West, certainly in Britain, perhaps in France. We've now seen Olaf Scholz coming out and admitting, that the days of cheap prices are over, which I think many people in Germany will be rather dismayed to hear. Whereas in Russia, as on the contrary, a consolidation of society as they feel themselves under siege. Now, on the military side of things, I think, Gonzalo, you got it exactly correct. Now, again, I stress again, I am not a military person. Everything I glean about the war, I get from secondhand, from people whose reliability, I have to say this straight away, I cannot always vouch for. What you tell me, Gonzalo, about the situation in Kharkov, I place 100% reliance upon, because I've developed a great understanding of what you do. But there are other people I don't know, I can't speak for. But anyway, there's an accumulation of information from many sources, including, by the way, Ukrainian sources. And they seem to be saying the same thing, that the battle in Donbass around the Kramatorsk, Slavyansk conurbation is going to be the big Titanic battle. The forces, the Ukrainian forces there are essentially isolated from the rest of Ukraine, that there's desperate attempts by people. I've seen some really distressing pictures, by the way, of people in Kramatorsk trying to, going to the railway station, trying to escape Kramatorsk because they're afraid that they'll be caught up in the street fighting there. Anyway, things of that kind. There's going to be the enormous battle. The Ukrainians themselves, or at least some Ukrainian commentators, seem to be admitting that they are in serious trouble in eastern Ukraine. I read on the BBC a report by John Simpson, who is this lead reporter that the BBC has and has had ever since the 70s. I can't stand him, by the way, but that's another story. I mean, he's an important figure amongst the media world here. He's in Lviv, and he talks about how people in Lviv are far from optimistic, don't share the kind of synthetic euphoria that there's been in some parts of the West about the way the war is going. On the contrary, there's a sense of deepening foreboding there. And I get the sense that the situation in Donbass is going very badly wrong for the Ukrainians. We're getting more film from Mariupol, which is, there's now clearly, the fighting has clearly now reached the factories, the Azovstal Steelworks, Ilyich factory, which, by the way, just for the record, is named after Vladimir Lenin. His full name was Vladimir Ilyich Lenin. So this is obviously a leftover from the Soviet era, this name for this factory. And of course, I agree with you completely that they will not go for Kharkov. I don't see this at all. I mean,
my thinking is,
Kharkov is a much bigger place, as I understand it, than Mariupol.
Yes,
they would not want to get
much
bogged down. Would not want to get bogged down in street fighting in Kharkov. Nikolaev is much smaller. It's more useful to them at this time. There are large forces apparently gathering there. It's close to their supply lines in Crimea. It seems logical that they would go for Nikolaev next. Where they will go after that, I'm not even going to try and guess.
No, the story seems to be, and this is really, informed guesswork, because nobody knows what the Russians are planning. Only they do. But what it seems to be the order of battle is, the Kramatorsk cauldron, that number one, then Nikolaev, and the attacks that are going on here in Kharkov. Yeah, they strike me as just a feint to keep whatever forces are in Kharkov pinned down, and not trying to shuffle off to deal with to help rather in the Kramatorsk area, which if you look at a map, it's not that far away. Now the thing is Kharkov is enormous. Okay, it's a big city. Okay, it's I would say it's sort of like London size, quite frankly, in terms of its being spread out. It's not as dense in terms of population per square kilometer, but in terms of area size, I live in London, so I can say with some authority that they're roughly the same size in terms of how spread out they are. So capturing that size territory, that's no easy task. And I think that the Russians understand something that the West obviously does not, or the Americans at least do not, that if you destroy an army, you create a power vacuum that something has to fill. Do you want to be that force that has to fill it? No, obviously not. What you want is to have the army surrender, but continue doing their job of policing and maintaining order. I mean, your opposing army, in this case, the Ukrainian armed forces. And so my thinking is that they are desperately trying to have the Ukrainian army surrender. And they're going to need one big decisive victory that will unfortunately require the deaths of countless men. I mean, my thinking is that the Zelensky regime should have surrendered by now. It's pointless because we know how this story is going to end. They should have surrendered, but of course he can't because the neo-Nazi thugs around him and the fact that they insisted on speaking to the Greek parliament, as Alex told us, that shows that he is completely captured. He is the finger puppet of these crazy people. And so this war is going to go on to the very last Ukrainian.
Yes. Not only is he the finger puppet, real quick, Alexander, not only is he the finger puppet, but the MPs in Europe are playing along in this show.
Yes, I know.
Hello?
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah,
hello?
We hear you, Can you hear us, Gonzalo?
Oh, he's
We
gone.
lost Gonzalo.
We lost Gonzalo. I hope we'll get him again.
Anyway, what do you think about what I said?
I completely agree, but can I just also add to what Gonzalo was saying, that of course this isn't just the hardliners, the neo-Nazis and people like that in Ukraine that want to continue the war. It's some Western governments. The British government is also, trying to keep the war going. Boris Johnson.
Sorry, am I back?
Yeah.
Yes, you're back. You're back. You're back.
Sorry.
Very welcome back, Gonzalo. But it isn't just these people who are trying in Kiev and in Ukraine who want to keep the war going. It's certain Western governments. When
Borrell said it.
What? Sorry.
Borrell, he said as much.
Borrell said it, and of course, when Zelensky made big concessions in Istanbul, and by the way, it's indispensable that you read Lavrov's latest comments about what happened in Istanbul, because that provides a full understanding of what happened. It was the Ukrainians who made all the big moves in Istanbul, not the Russians. The Russians didn't budge. They didn't shift at all. I've done a program about it, and I would urge people to watch it because there's still some misunderstanding about the events in Istanbul. But anyway, Johnson was so alarmed that he telephoned Zelensky and seems to have tried to get Zelensky to retract some of those concessions. So Western governments want to keep this war going. Hardliners in Ukraine want to keep this war going. And it is profoundly unethical because what they are doing is they are destroying Ukraine. What Ukraine needs to do is to make peace. They've been very fortunate, actually, that the Russians, when they went into Ukraine, were prepared to sit down and to negotiate and to come to some kind of an agreement with Ukraine. And the terms the Russians proposed are hard for Ukraine, much harder than the Minsk agreements would have been if they'd ever been implemented. But they are not impossible. They leave a Ukraine. The way this is going to go is that when this all ends, there will be no Ukraine left. And of course, there will be thousands, tens of thousands of people who would otherwise be alive, and they will be dead. I think this is an unforgivable approach to this war, because, as you absolutely rightly say, Gonzalo, this war ultimately is only going to have one outcome, and anybody who thinks otherwise is just misunderstanding it completely.
Yeah, there are 2 points that I want to make. Number one, people don't seem to understand the geographic situation of this war, because and even people who are military experts, because you see, from the Russian point of view, they've got all their gear there. There's no logistic hassle. It's not like the United States that has to ship all its gear to the Middle East or wherever from the continental United States. So for them, it's right there. So they can put in as much men and material and gasoline and whatever it takes to win this thing. So it's for them, it's over, because the Ukrainians have to get gear from other people, and now they have to get gasoline, and soon enough it'll be basic munitions, right? So there's that point that, it's not merely that on paper the Russians are bigger. It's not merely that they are outfighting the Ukrainians, which they are. It's also that they, as a practical matter, have unlimited resupply potential, whereas the Ukrainians do not. It's over for the Ukraine. And so to sue for peace is what they should do. The other point I wanted to make is that Victoria Nuland, the Wicked Witch of Washington, is on her broomstick flying around to the various capitals. And it seems to me clear that she is trying to shore up support for sanctions and shore up support for her goon squad in Kiev. I mean, that seems to me what she's doing, or am I reading this incorrectly?
I think you're reading it rightly, but I would also add, and this is, I think, follow up from what conversation Alex and I had perhaps yesterday, when time senses are beginning to get flaky a bit. But as I also understand it, she's been trying to get more countries to come up and provide arms to Ukraine. There's growing complaints on the part of some East European states that they're running down their inventories. Even the British have been saying quietly that they run out of anti-tank missiles. So there's, in some ways, growing resistance to sending even more, because, to be straightforward about it, there isn't much more to send. And they've been saying, look, if we want us to send more, we've got to have replacements from the US. And of course, we're in a time of economic hardship, and we might not be able to pay full price for those. So there's an element of that about it as well. Now, Greece historically bought some weapon systems from the Soviet Union and Russia at the end of the Cold War and afterwards. So we got some ex-Russian systems, and Cyprus also does, I believe. And so that's partly why she's been going around, as I said, trying to drum up military support for Ukraine, and also economic support. Economic support in the form of keeping the sanctions steady. And
but I think that also there must be something else going on here with Victoria Nuland, because for her to go on a tour like this, because let's face facts, Victoria Nuland, insofar as this whole thing is concerned, she is the commanding general of this whole operation. She is the point person insofar as Ukraine. For those of you who don't know, I did a long video about her on my channel. She is the Undersecretary of State for Political Affairs, and she was the one who engineered the 2014 coup d'etat that put in place these Atlanticists, globalists, who've been NATO trained ever since 2014 and have been shelling the Donbass ever since 2014. She's the brains behind this whole thing. And for her to go around to all these different countries, the whole thing must be falling apart. I mean, it seems to me that there would not be a reason for her to dedicate this effort unless the thing is sort of like collapsing. And we're starting to see in the mainstream media, very quietly, some stories that seem to signal a collapse in support for the Zelensky regime. In the New York Times, there was an admission of how on March 29th, a bunch of Russian POWs were rather gruesomely murdered by Ukrainian forces. And this appeared in the New York Times. And there's other little hints here and there that, it seems like it's starting to collapse, the narrative. What do you think of that?
I think that's perhaps rather overstating it. What I think is happening is that the political class still remains across Europe very committed to this project.
Mm-hmm.
I think that the Brussels bureaucracies, remember there's two of them in Brussels, there's NATO and the EU. They're both located in Brussels. They go to the same restaurants, they mix in the same cafes. My brother used to have a job at the European Commission. So this was a temporary job. He wasn't ever permanently posted there, but he did, but I used to visit him. I used to see how it worked. And it's fair to say in those days, these two bureaucracies didn't mix very much, but apparently they do today. And of course, they all mix, they all talk to each other, they all work each other up. They all have already these ideological fixations. But what is happening is that just below the surface, the cracks are starting to deepen. So in Germany, industrial groups, and when I say industrial groups, I mean the BDI, which is the big German industrial union, is basically coming along and saying, look, if you want to close down gas imports from Russia, be aware you're basically telling German industry to just commit suicide, because that's what it would do. So you're getting people coming forward like that. They're still, in my opinion, basically outside the political class, but they're starting to press the political class and saying this isn't working. And of course, we have the cost of living crisis in Britain, which is getting worse. I'm reading reports all the time about how bad it is. We see the tightening of the opinion polls in France, and I want to stress again that I still expect Macron to win. There aren't elections in France are deeply controlled affairs. If Le Pen were to win, I mean, the system would have completely broken down. And I say that because even if they've managed to compromise her in some way, what she stands for is still something that the system would be horrified if she were to be elected, even if she didn't do any of the things that she said she would do. But anyway, all of this is happening across Europe. We've had Orban's election victory, which has been deeply dismaying. So the cracks are appearing under the surface, but the political class in Europe and in Britain includes the media. I mean, you've got to understand that they are tightly integrated with each other. Most politicians today in Britain have had background in the media. Boris Johnson was a journalist. Boris Johnson's career has been as a journalist. They still remain overwhelmingly committed to this project. And the fact that the project isn't working, the fact that the ruble is strengthening, the fact that industry in Russia is showing growth, that the Russian economy isn't imploding, that the situation in Ukraine, the east of Ukraine, to the extent that they are aware of it, is going wrong, to the fact that there's growing disaffection within their own countries, is making them more angry. So you get these articles appearing. There's articles in the New York Times. I read that article, by the way. There was also very interesting articles in Reuters and in the Financial Times. Very interesting article in the Financial Times with a little comment squirreled away that the latest sanctions that they imposed yesterday mark a point beyond which they had ever expected to go. They'd all assumed that the sanctions that they'd imposed in February would be enough to do the job, and they're rather dismayed that they're still having to impose more sanctions. You get all of these little things appearing there. This is basically because the business community is insisting, is putting in these sort of pressures. And also, they have to some extent to acknowledge the realities, because as pressure on people intensifies, to be straightforward about it, people will start to become angry. They'll start to doubt the narrative they're being fed. They'll start searching out alternative sources of news. And of course, at that point, the doubts will spread even further. So, you know, they have to acknowledge some things. But, you know, you do get bizarre things. I read an article in The Guardian yesterday that Ukraine has lost 95 tanks over the course of this entire war. Just 95. And that they need more tanks from the West so that they can launch a counteroffensive to rescue Mariupol. This is in the Guardian, and it is yesterday.
Yeah, no, it's the level of self-deception is just bizarre at this point. I mean, because for a while there, I remember very clearly that I went through a phase or a moment of like, wait, am I wrong or are they wrong? Because the disparity between the stories about what one group of people were saying was the reality on the ground, and the other group saying just fantasy land. And it was so disparate that I thought to myself, wait, this I must be wrong, you know? And now it's just becoming laughable. And I think too, Moon Over Alabama, which is a great website, great blog, he was the one pointing out that, you know, you're getting to a point where it might be that the mainstream media is starting to admit to the reality of the Zelensky regime and the reality on the ground in Ukraine, because if they continue denying it as blatantly as they've been doing it before, they're losing the last shreds of any kind of credibility, because people are not that stupid. People are realizing, especially interested people are realizing that the story being told and the reality on the ground are on different planets practically.
Yes.
And so I think that might be an issue, that they're realizing we've gone too far down this rabbit hole of fantasy land.
Yes, I think that's true. And of course, bear in mind that a lot of this is appearing in the business press. And it was business people do insist upon getting accurate information. So the Financial Times, which is a deeply ideological newspaper, it's absolutely neocon central, but it has to have articles that every so often explain it as it is, because business people insist on that. They have to have information that they can treat as reliable. So that's why, by the way, it's always best to go to the business media. There was also very, very good, well, it wasn't a good article, but it was an interesting article in that it gave a lot of information about the diplomacy, the pre-war diplomacy in the Wall Street Journal. And it basically admitted that the diplomacy from the Western side had been badly handled. Now, badly handled is, in my opinion, not an understatement. It's a mendacious claim. It was not badly handled. It was deliberately intended, in my opinion, to result in the outcome that we are seeing now. I think that was always the plan. But the fact is, it did contain criticism. And since we're on the topic of criticism, I wanted to wonder, Gonzalo, what you made of the sudden reappearance of the great man himself. Can you hear us?
You're fine.
The great man, the fact that Barak suddenly resurfaced after all this time of silence, the fact that he was there with Biden, is it another sign of the cracks? Because one of the most interesting things has been the extent to which Barak has been almost invisible over the last few weeks.
Yeah, and he...
Hello, Gonzalo?
Gonzalo,
I think we've lost him for the moment. Oh, Gonzalo, you there? Hello? Alex, perhaps you could just give us a thought about that, and I'd be interested to know what you think of the reappearance of the great one.
The great one, the man pulling the strings. Gonzalo.
I was talking.
We lost
I guess
you.
I was talking to nothing but air.
No, just pick up at Alexander's question.
About Barak's reappearance.
About Barack Obama.
Appearance.
What I think is that they're positioning Joe to give him the old heave-ho. As simple as that. Because I don't know if you heard the part that I mentioned, a famous photograph that appeared of Barack Obama smiling and surrounded by a whole host of coteries, a whole coterie of people rather, who were just sucking up to him, and Joe was just standing alone, staring off emptily into space. The man, cognitively, he's gone. Okay, and his policies, his entire administration is a complete and utter disaster. And so my thinking at this time is that they're going to hold on to him until January 21st of 2023, and then get rid of him and put in Kamala, who will be the ultimate Obama puppet. Kamala Harris was all over Barack Obama, just sticking to him like white on rice, and completely acting as who she is, which is the puppet of Barack Obama. And so I think that's in the cards. And I think also it would be a very neat solution to all the problems, because you blame it all on Joe. The biolabs, the Hunter Biden laptop garbage, the disaster of the foreign policy. You take that entire bag of excrement, you put it all nice and neat into one pile, and just toss it at Joe and have him go out the door, and that's that. That seems to me that the play that they're going to implement, and the only question is how quickly they're going to do it. And I think that perhaps some of the stories slowly filtering out, because you were right, Alexander, that I was overstating the split, but it could be that this is the beginning of the detachment of the Biden administration, detachment in the sense of taking it away, unplugging it, and tossing it aside to be replaced by the Kamala Harris administration, which will be much more under the thumb of Barack Obama.
I agree with that. Absolutely. I agree with that. I'd be very interested to know your views also, Alex, on this, because can I just also say, I'm increasingly coming round to the view that this investigation of the laptop, which we've been, I think, with some good cause, all of us rather cynical about, but I think it's beginning to gain an increasing look of reality about it. And there's now calls from Jonathan Turley and others for special counsel to be appointed because of the rather obvious conflicts of interest. And I think if special counsel is appointed, then it's curtains, straightforwardly. And I don't think we'll get to the point of special counsel, because if there's an indictment, I suspect it's curtains too. Because remember, even if the indictment is on fairly limited grounds, the reality of the American legal system is that you can always expand it as more information comes out. And I'm afraid,
and can I point out something else that I suspect? The Durham investigation is just grinding along, and they actually had like a big reveal a couple of days ago that just it's gathering steam. It's just going along. And this is purely speculative, because we know that the target of the Durham investigation is basically Hillary Clinton and the whole Clinton machine. I would not be surprised if it turns out later that the one protecting the Durham investigation is the Barack Obama team. That they're trying to figure out a neat way to get rid of the Clintonistas, and that they figure that if they protect Durham, Durham will do their dirty work for them. And you see how it works, because there's always been this enormous frenemy feel between Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton and their two respective camps, because sometimes they have to work together because they have common objectives, and other times that they are working against one another. The Hillary Clinton people hate the Barack Obama people because of the loss in 2016, in 2008. And so it seems that this could be for Obama, because Obama is one of those guys, he's a schemer. He's always trying to play something. And he always thinks that he's 10 moves smarter than everybody else. The Durham investigation, I mean, quite apart from what you're saying of a special counsel for the Biden administration, and that would be curtains for the Biden administration. But the Durham investigation might be a way for Barack Obama to get rid of the Clintonistas too. You see what I'm saying?
Absolutely. I mean, I have to say, if I was of a cynical turn of mind, which perhaps I am, certainly at times I am, it is interesting that we have two investigations underway, both of which are quite obviously targeting Barack Obama's rivals within the Democratic Party. One is coming after Biden, and the other is coming after Hillary Clinton. So whom does that leave in charge of the show? But the man who now appears, we have the drum roll, and here he comes, and we're reminded of what a great man he is and all that. And as you rightly said, his anointed successor, Kamala, whom everybody detests, is nonetheless there. But of course, it could very well be the final moment when Obama and what he represents finally captures whatever's left of the Democratic Party. Alex, have you any thoughts about this? Because I'm always interested, especially interested, you also being American, what you make of this business of Obama suddenly reappearing in this way.
No, I mean, all you have to do is look at the video that came out from that event, and you can see that Kamala is all over Obama, and Obama's all over Kamala. I mean, there's no doubt about it. When you look at the body language, those two are they're a couple. they're together on this, and I think Obama's just come to the realization that Kamala is going to be the president, and they don't have anybody else.
Yes.
We've been going on about this for 2 years. Who's it going to be? Who can replace Joe Biden, because Kamala's this and she's that? I think even the Obama camp, he sat down with Susan Rice and all of his advisors, and they said, you know what? We don't have anybody else. We're going to have to go with Kamala. Let's I
have a slightly different take on it. Because we all agree. I mean, let's have a show of hands. Who thinks here? Raise your hand if you think Kamala Harris is a genius. Crickets. Yeah. And so my thinking is that Kamala Harris is a fool. I mean, she is indisputably a fool. She's ignorant. She's stupid. She's everything. I actually think that's a feature, not a bug. I think that that's why Barack Obama picked her, because she cannot create a base of her own. A base of loyalty. And the fact that she herself, it's very well known that she treats her staff like garbage. I mean, really, to the point that they keep, it's a revolving door at her staff, because she just, she's a person who cannot control herself and treats them, lets out all of her frustrations and resentments on her staff, which is really despicable. But I think that might be the reason that Barack Obama picks her, because such a person will never create her own independent power base. Therefore, she will always be dependent and the plaything of Barack Obama himself, because nobody else will support her. So she has to do whatever he says to maintain her position. I mean, in that regard,
I understand the logic.
I agree with that, but I mean, you brought up a good point, Alexander, about Kamala, and we've talked about it. I agree that it's kind of like what Merkel did in Germany, where she didn't have anyone around her who could usurp her power, and she did that deliberately. So Obama's kind of doing the same thing. But the problem with Kamala that I think is going to plague Obama is that Kamala's got quite an ego, and when she gets in power, she's going to actually want to govern, and I think that's going to be a problem for Obama. I just think that the Obama camp, they said, look, we're going to have to go with her. If she gives us problems, fine. If she doesn't, great. And let's just try to ride it out for 2 years. We're going to lose the House. We're going to lose the Senate. But at least let's get her in place. Then let's get the VP that we want in place. And after those 2 years, we'll push hard to get that VP, whoever it's going to be, to win in 2024. I think that's probably how Obama's game planning it. But, who knows? That's how I think he's probably seeing it. 2024 is what he's looking at.
I agree. Now, can I just say, I mean, this is just my, point about this, which is that the whole thing had very much the look to me of Barack Obama coming along and telling everybody that this is the moment when Kamala becomes president. I am giving my blessing to Kamala as the president. I'm no longer interested in Biden. He's running out of road. She has my blessing and my support as the president. The future next president of the United States. That'll happen in a few weeks' time. And then, of course, what do? I mean, do they reverse all the policies that we've had with the administration over Ukraine? Do they start trying to de-escalate this crisis?
No, they dump it. They dump it. Okay. And
how can you dump this crisis? I mean, well,
if you have a new administration. I mean, well, you don't think of it, because you see, you attach to Biden all the bad stuff, and you have Kamala say to Russia, oh, that was all Biden. He was evil. He was this, that, the other. You were crazy. And the Clintonistas, and Victoria Nuland is going to also be gone. Okay. And that's why I think part of the reason that she took this tour, because she's scared of losing her position, because she's a Clintonista. Remember that. And so my thinking is that the Obama people will throw Joe out the window, just defenestrate him, and Kamala will come in like the shining lady and try to make friends with everybody. Okay, I think that is the play. I don't think it will work. I think that the Russians are far too they don't trust the Americans anymore at all. It's not just Putin. Putin hasn't trusted the Americans in 15 years at least.
No.
It's the Russian people. They have decided, no, forget it. The West is not for us. And so I think that they're going to try to walk back everything and try to make friends, especially as the European economy tanks. And a lot of pressure comes from the Europeans towards the Americans, like, hey, and also the inevitable problems of the dollar itself, because with the end of the petrodollar, we're going to start to see all kinds of nightmares going on in the United States. But I mean, that's my thinking. What'll happen? Who knows? I mean, we got to wait. This TV show is just, the episodes are few and far between, unfortunately. And so we'll just have to be patient and wait to see what happens.
I agree. Any feeling about what's going to happen in Ukraine itself in terms of the government there? I mean, I have to say, and I mentioned this.
What do I think?
Yeah, I was going to say, I just mentioned one observation, which is that Zelensky, of course, went on a tour of a certain town near Kiev, which I'm not going to mention the name of because, well, we all know why. And there he was, surrounded by all these men,
thugs,
helmets and things. Exactly. And I have to say, I thought he looked absolutely terrified. I don't know whether this is just my own perception, but I mean, he looked small and frightened, surrounded by these people. There's supposed to be these negotiations. As I said, we've now had full clarification about them from the Russians, who made it absolutely clear that as far as they're concerned, they've not backtracked on any one of their demands: demilitarization, denazification, recognition of the independence of Donbass, recognition of Crimea's reunification with Russia. Lavrov was also dropping very heavy hints that the Russians intend to keep their troops in Ukraine, presumably in southern Ukraine, in places like Kherson and Zaporozhye and wherever, until any agreement that is actually signed and ratified is fully implemented, because they're not going to go through the nightmare of the Minsk agreement all over again, where something is signed and agreed and then reneged upon. So it is actually an extremely important set of comments that he made. But
what does
actually
to comment on that? Those comments were not made for the West; they were made for the internal Russian public, because the Russian public was outraged at the notion that there was going to be any kind of backtrack on the part of the Russians on the Russian side. And so, so just to clarify that Lavrov was speaking to his home crowd. He didn't care about what the rest of the world thought. Yeah,
absolutely.
Have you guys seen the videos out of Kherson that have been coming out? I mean, they've been coming out of RIA Novosti, so they're coming out of Russian state media. But I mean, the videos are of kids playing in the park, and everything's peaceful now that the Russians are in control of it. The Russians aren't going to give it back. They're not going to give any of this territory back at all.
You know that they're not going to give it back when they started insisting that everybody in Kherson had to trade and do commerce in rubles. And they were, from my understanding, that they were very polite and did not try to financially harm anybody. They gave very, very generous exchange rates, and they allowed people to exchange their hryvnias for rubles, and they also opened bank accounts for people in rubles at their banks, and made the whole process very easy. But the Kherson economy is now ruble based, and like I said, they obliged everybody to start doing commerce, supermarket, the basic commerce in rubles, and they did not say, and they gave a very generous exchange rate, but the hryvnia is dead in Kherson. You don't do that if you're planning on giving back the cities at some point in the future. They are never giving it back.
I have to say I agree. And as I say, if you pass Lavrov's comments, which, as I did in the video that I made, I mean, that was absolutely blindingly obvious to me that even if they nominally continue to accept Ukrainian sovereignty of these areas, and one wonders for how long even that, by the way, in reality and in fact, the Russians had every intention of staying there, and that was clearly what Lavrov was signaling. But let's say Zelensky is, he realizes the situation in Ukraine, in eastern Ukraine, is collapsing. He sees that Nikolaev is about to fall. He's under all kinds of pressure from some people within Ukraine. I can't imagine everybody in Ukraine wants to see the war continue until Ukraine is destroyed. So let's say he wants to sign a peace. Can he? And what happens to him if he does?
No, he can't. He can't, and because he is now a hostage to those far right people, de facto hostage, and he can't back off. And also, the thing that deeply troubles me is that, from in 2014, a lot of these right-wing militias, neo-Nazi groups, and what have you, they were dissolved, yes, but they were absorbed into the armed forces of the Ukraine, and they were spread out. And the word is basically one in 10 soldiers spread out pretty much evenly across the entire armed force is a die-hard ideologue of this neo-Nazi, basically racial purity, Ukrainian, anti-Russian ilk. Okay, and so that means that this army will not give up. Okay, that's the thing that I'm terrified of. Because when you have a stiffening agent like that inside an armed force, it's basically, just have to kill them all, okay? Which is, of course, something that I would hope would never happen. Because, and I think also the Russians, not from a humanitarian perspective, but merely from a practical, pragmatic perspective, they don't want to annihilate the armed forces of Ukraine. Because if they annihilate the armed forces of Ukraine, who is going to fill in that vacuum? They will, and they don't want to, because it would be a huge task. And so, but I think that if this is the case, that Zelensky is essentially a hostage, and the Ukrainian armed force is so ideologically motivated and so stiff in that regard, then there will be no negotiated peace. It'll be a war of conquest, and it will get very, very ugly before it's over. That's my thinking. I hope I'm wrong.
I'm afraid I agree, and I'm going to make a few quick observations here. I think that what completely gave the reality away was what Alex told us at the start of the program, that Zelensky brought those two Azov people with him. To the thing at the Greek Parliament. I mean, it showed who ultimately is in control in Kiev, and I can't help but wonder, by the way, whether the fact that they were brought there was partly to make sure that he didn't stray off message, because Zelensky does do that sometimes.
Can I give you my theory, Alexander? Keep up. I have to give you my theory real quick. Maybe you're right, but I think that these Azov guys, human nature, they're kind of getting sick of being behind the scenes.
Well, that's
I think they want to kind of say, you know what? I'm sick of being behind the scenes. I'm sick of this clown joker going around from parliament to parliament and getting all the credit. I'm sick of all the governments worshiping him like he's a hero. We're the guys, and I think they're kind of saying, you know what? It's time for us to come out of the shadows. I don't go keep on going.
You're probably right.
That was my thinking.
I totally agree.
But I mean, the implications of this are awesome. Well, first of all, one has to worry about Zelensky himself. I appreciate he probably doesn't have many fans on this channel, but the fact is he's a human being. If he's surrounded by these very dangerous people, one has to worry about him. But putting all that aside, and of course Zelensky is only one individual, for Ukraine, if a proper peace is impossible, then what will be left of Ukraine at the end? I very much fear, Gonzalo, that you're probably right, and that what has started as a war by Russia to try to force a peace is going to evolve into a war to the end, in which at the end of it there is nothing like a Ukraine going to be left, no sort of Ukraine that we can recognize any longer. And I think that that is a terrible thing to say, but I think it is where the situation is heading.
Can I ask both you guys a question? Going off of our show with Scott Ritter, he said something that stayed with me for a while, that for Russia to really denazify, they have to hit the statue of Bandera in Lviv. I mean, that's like the heart of it all. maybe that's the way, or do you guys think that's the way they finally get rid of the Azov, Bandera, Idar, Svobodna right sector once and for all? Once and for all is to go straight at Lviv. I'm not saying take over Lviv and circle. I'm just saying go straight at it and just go full force into it. Because at the end of the day, what you said, Gonzalo and Alexander, I'm hearing you, and you're saying, okay, this NAZI problem is not going to be easy to get rid of. But if you want to get rid of it, I go back to what Scott said, you have to go to the heart of the problem. And that heart is sitting in that city where they have that statue of that man with that history where that entire ideology started. I mean, just a thought, because when he said that, it just stayed with me, that if you really want to put a stake through the heart of this thing, you have to go to where it originated.
Well, I think that's what you do. Now, I have to say, if that's right, then I'm going to have to say straight away that I was wrong, because I thought that what the Russians were more likely to do was to try and decant all these people to Lviv and then sort of cut it off from the rest of Ukraine. But
I'm just throwing it out there.
Yeah, I know. I was just saying, but war, we must never forget, has its own logic. If the Ukrainian army in Donbass is destroyed, if Nikolaev is captured, if after that Kharkiv is also freed of all of these people, brought under Russian control, if the Russians take over central Ukraine, but the situation is still not ended, there's still no actual political resolution, then of course war imposes its own logic. If you're not prepared to retreat from what you say you would do, and that's what Lavrov essentially said, if opinion in your own country is hardening and is insisting that this must be seen through to its conclusion, then whatever your original intentions may have been, by the time you get to the border of, well, let's call it Galicia, Western Ukraine, Lviv region, maybe by that point, you no longer are in a position to stop whatever your original plan might have been. Gonzalo, your thoughts?
My thinking is that the people I've spoken to in Russia say that they are comfortable seeing this through to the end of the year and into the next year. Okay, that would be a full 12 months of war, of full-on war, because this is full-on war. Let's not.
Can I say I'm hearing the same, by the way.
Yeah. So, because the Russian people, I cannot emphasize enough how counterproductive the sanctions were. And if we look at the example of the sanctions on Iran and how the sanctions on Iran shore up the position of the mullahs, of the ayatollahs, right? They didn't collapse. On the contrary, it should have been the lesson to the West. The sanctions don't work; they are counterproductive. But spilt milk. Let's move on. The Russian people are. There's also another factor going on. It's generational. The people who are truly powerful today, the people of a generation who are between, say, 45 and 60, who, I mean, we all know that is roughly the curve where you are coming to your own and you're at your peak insofar as your power and prestige are concerned. Those individuals were, young 20s, teenagers, young 20s in 1990. And so they saw the disaster of the 90s and how miserable everything was. And so they are hardened. They're not going to have a problem. They're going to be thinking, we can handle this. We've handled worse. We can handle this. We've got the money. We've got the economy. So what if I can't buy an iPhone? So what if I can't buy a BMW? You see my rationale. And so
I absolutely see
all
your
the way. Yeah, they're going to
I
go
absolutely
all the way.
see you. I absolutely.
The issue becomes, where do they end? And my thinking is that they're going to take over the whole country. Eventually, in 2 years, 4 years, you are going to see a rump Mediterranean Ukraine that will be led by Viktor Medvedchuk, and it will be, the capital will be Kiev, and Kiev will be on the far eastern end of this, roughly oval-shaped rump state, and all the north coast of the Black Sea, that is Odessa, Kherson, Mariupol, all of that will be part of Russia, Kharkov included. That's my thinking. The only issue with the gray area would be maybe the region of Poltava, because Poltava is kind of more Ukraine than Russian, so who knows? But it also depends on who were the people who fled, because we have to keep in mind, all these people who fled, I would guess that roughly a third will never come back to Ukraine. Okay. And so, and those people in particular from the East are predominantly ethnic Ukrainians who have fled to the West. They've fled to the west of Ukraine and fled to the Western European countries. And so this eastern side, the east of Ukraine and the south of present-day Ukraine, that is the north shore of the Black Sea, I think that's all going to become part of Russia. I do not see it even becoming a part of a fictitious Novorossiya. No, they're just going to, it's just going to be conquest. I think that's what's happened because of the sanctions. The sanctions hardened their will.
I completely agree. I think the Novorossiya project is dead, actually. And if you listen to the people that are being interviewed, now this is, of course, I want to stress again, Russian media now. And one has to be extremely careful. So I mean, but I would say there was an interesting interview. There was an interesting report from the BBC about a British BBC journalist who went to a city in the Donbass, Lysychansk. I can't pronounce it properly. You probably know it's near Severodonetsk. But anyway, he met people there in apparently a shelter who were being shelled and all the rest. And to his astonishment, and it was reported by the BBC, so I do want to give the BBC some credit for this, he found that the people there were not criticizing Putin. They were not criticizing Russia. They were criticizing Zelensky and their own government for starting, for as the people ultimately responsible for the war. But anyway, if you listen to the reports of people in Donbass and in eastern Ukraine, I mean, it's absolutely clear to me that they're not interested in Novorossiya. They consider themselves Russians. They want to be part of Russia. And I think this is now almost inevitable. I mean, I think that after what has happened, I think that's the sentiment in these places. I think, as you rightly say, Gonzalo, that's also another sentiment in Russia. I think Russian attitudes have hardened. I think they say to themselves, enough of the West. These people don't like us. They don't want us. Why should we continue to make compromises in order to make them, to try to satisfy people in the West or to meet the West halfway when the West shows no interest in ever meeting with us halfway? There's a famous speech that Stalin made. I don't like to quote Stalin, but sometimes one can do. But he made it at the height of the Battle of Moscow, when things in Russia were far worse than they are now. And he said about the Germans, if they want a war to the death, then they've got one. And he actually used a stronger word, which I don't want to use. But if you want that kind of a conflict, you've got one. And I think that's very much the mood in Russia at the moment. The West has gone all out to destroy Russia's economy, its society. That's how they perceive it in Russia, to isolate them, to cause them major problems. And if that's the approach that they're taking, well, we are not interested any longer in negotiations. We're just going to impose our solutions, however long it takes. And if it takes us a few weeks, good. If it takes us a few months, well, we'll still do it. And if it takes us a whole year, well, we'll do that too. That's very much my sense of the mood in Russia. And if we have to forego, McDonald's and can't quite buy, expensive German perfumes and drive BMWs, well, we'll make do without.
What I think, I personally think also that this is a tertiary effect, perhaps, if you want to call it that. But I think that this whole situation, look, I think we all agree that one way or another, the Russians are going to crack this. And it'll be over, and it'll be a decisive and clear Russian victory. Now, insofar as the Russian economy is concerned, I have no doubt in my mind whatsoever that the Russian central bank, led by that very capable Elvira, her last name always slips my mind. But
Nabulina.
Thank you. She has been doing all kinds of magic to bring back the ruble. Okay, because I have no doubt in my mind that a lot of the fact that the ruble is back and steady after barely 30 days of these sanctions was a lot of financial magic on the part of the Russian central bank. But that's not the point I want to make. The point I want to make is that, the fact that they're going to win, the fact that these sanctions failed so spectacularly, the fact that the Russian people are more cohesive than ever before, the fact that precisely because of this external pressure, it has squeezed out the Atlanticist Russians who have fled, like that gentleman. What's his name?
Chubais.
Chubais. Thank you so much. Who left for Turkey, who was an Atlanticist, and a lot of other Atlanticists in the Kremlin upper echelons. They've also been squeezed out or radically changed their tunes. I think that this will lead to a flowering of Russia. I think that it will be a real, true rebirth of the Russian nation. The first, a true rebirth after the collapse of '91. And I think that, and I'm not saying this as a cheerleader. I'm not saying this, because I'm in favor of something or against something. No, I'm just talking about objectively. I think that the famous animal spirits in Russia, will flower, will blossom in this heady period of time over the next few years. Because this war is going to be won decisively, you like it or not. And that will lead to a Russian self-confidence that we haven't seen in a long, long time. And that paradoxically might lead to a lot of international geopolitical benefit in terms of stability, long-term in the region. That's my think at this time.
I agree. Now, I'm very, very much afraid that I'm coming up to
I was just about to say we have maybe like 2, 3, 4 minutes left, and then we have to do a hard stop. But real quick, any comments from both of you about the news with regards to two topics: the West's plan to surround Kaliningrad, and Kaczynski, Poland's remarks that they are going to put nukes on their territory. Real quick, your thoughts, and we'll wrap it up there.
I mean, very briefly, I think that any suggestion of surrounding Kaliningrad is, I mean, the Pentagon is going to just go white over. I mean, this is a place which is one of the most heavily fortified places in the world. There are definitely Russian nukes probably already there, I'm guessing. I think that will be an incredibly reckless and ludicrous thing to do. That's the first thing to say. If they start to go down that road, the Russians will defend Kaliningrad, and at that point we could be in a very, very dangerous situation. Gonzalo's left us, but I hope he's back. But I don't think I don't think it's going to work out because, I was listening to General Milley the other day, just I think it was yesterday, in fact, and this didn't come across to me as a man in any enthusiasm to start a hot war at the moment. I think he realizes that there's all sorts of problems. He's also got his eye fixed on what the Chinese are doing. He doesn't want a nuclear war in Europe with Russia at this moment in time. So I don't think they're going to do anything like that around Kaliningrad. I think that would be an insane thing to do. That's the first thing. The second thing about the nuclear weapons, I'm afraid that's a much more real possibility. Again, I don't think the Pentagon would be pleased, but I think that could happen, at which point, of course, the Russians will respond by bringing their nuclear weapons closer to the Western borders and probably into Belarus. Now, can I just say, I am not a military strategist in all of these things.
Hello.
I think from a Russian point of view,
we hear you. We hear you, Gonzalo.
Yeah, we hear you. Much better to have nuclear weapons in Poland than in Ukraine, which is what I think the Russians were worried about. And from my understanding of the picture, if you start bringing forward Russian nuclear weapons to the Polish border, well, of course, that doesn't just bring Poland within reach of Russian medium-range nuclear weapons. It brings Germany within reach as well, and much of Central Europe, and conceivably even Britain. So actually, taking that kind of step shifts the balance of power, military power, we're talking about a nuclear war type scenario, closer, better in the Russian direction. So I think, these are reckless and dangerous ideas. They demonstrate a certain degree of, dare I say, desperation on some people's parts. I think the Pentagon will not be happy. I certainly don't think they're going to make any move against Kaliningrad. They're not prepared to send troops to Ukraine. Would they really want to take on Kaliningrad? But this nuclear, installing nuclear weapons in Poland, that's, it seems to me, a real possibility, not one I think the Pentagon would be happy about. It would ultimately be bad for Europe, but it would play out to Russia's military advantage, or that's what I've been told. Gonzalo, your thoughts?
Gonzalo, you're on mute.
Sorry about that.
Okay, we hear you. We hear you.
Okay, the idea of nuclear weapons in Poland is insane.
Yeah.
Simple as that. And I think it's the height of irresponsibility. And I think I'm hoping that once this war is over, that Western leadership will start being more sensible and look at things more pragmatically. Yeah. So anyway, I know that we're ending, and I hear your lovely babies are very unhappy.
Yeah.
Okay, so any final thoughts before we sign off for today, gentlemen?
No, we
Gonzalo,
need to stay. We need to stay continuously in touch, because this is a very fast-moving situation. Just a few minutes ago, I was getting more information about the situation in Mariupol. Obviously, this is from Russian or pro-Russian sources, so I can't vouch for its total accuracy. But it includes film of fighting going on in the industrial facilities. So it looks as if the battle is now really entering.
What is in those industrial facilities? What is there? What is hiding there? Who is hiding there?
That's a huge question. I'm not going to speculate. I don't know what is there, and I'm not going to speculate. You're getting all sorts of very wild claims circulating on the media about this. Or rather, I should say, alternative media. In the West, this is hardly reported. But certainly, this practice of sending helicopters into the Azovstal works, where they simply get shot down, is very, very, very strange. And it does suggest that something very, very big, important, secret is there. Any thoughts about this, Gonzalo?
Yeah, we mentioned before that Macron had called Putin specifically about opening up a humanitarian corridor. And Putin said basically no. Apparently there were two calls in this regard. So why on earth would the French president bother with a battle in the very heart of a problem that doesn't concern him? That seems very strange. Now here comes something even more strange. The Russians changed their minds and offered a humanitarian corridor out of Azovstal. And the Ukrainians denied it. They rejected the offer, and continued with this effort to find or bring back whatever is in Azovstal by way of helicopters that they can ill afford to lose at this stage of the war. There is something there. I'm sorry.
It would be a PR disaster for Zelensky. That's my thoughts.
Maybe this huge.
Maybe this French hostage situation is true, and Macron wants those guys out. But Zelensky and the Azov guys behind Zelensky said, "Don't you dare get those guys out, because if you get those guys out, and they start talking about how they were held hostage by us, well, then we're going to lose all the support from the European public." Who knows?
Well, but that doesn't make sense. And I mean, I don't mean to be rude. I'm sorry. That sounds extremely rude, and please forgive me. But my thinking is the following lines. See, if they're like French foreign legionnaires, for instance, or even French army, the Azov can just shoot them, and just bury the bodies, and they'll never be found until way later. There must be something very big there.
Yeah, but the Azov guys went out also, don't you think? Because I mean, if you were the Azov guys, don't you also say, well, we want to get out of here as well alive?
Sure. But we don't know. Look, we can speculate till the cows come home. I think that we can all agree that there's something huge there.
Yeah. Can I just add one very important addition to this? And I want to stress, I can't prove this, because this is all based on rumors and readouts of conversations which are very elliptical. But my understanding is this, that what Macron was trying to set up, the kind of humanitarian corridor that he was looking for, was one that was going to be supervised by Turkey, with Turkish naval warships going into into
Oh,
Mariupol
I read that
and
too.
bringing people
Okay.
out by sea. Whereas what the Russians said is we're absolutely not having any kind of outside military forces going into Mariupol, but they're welcome to leave by a land corridor which we will supervise and control. It's very different. Now, I do wonder what this whole thing is all about, because it does seem as if Macron and presumably Erdogan too, but Erdogan was presumably brought into this. We're trying to evacuate people by sea or something by sea, which would not be identified for what it was, whereas the Russians say, by all means you can leave, but we need to know who you are, what it is that you hiding there. So I'm sure there's an awful lot more going on. And of course, there's all sorts of wild rumors that there's all sorts of contacts between the Russian military in Mariupol and whoever is in Azovstal. One wonders how those communications have been conducted, by the way. But look, we can't speculate too far. All I will say is this. French elections, first round is on Sunday. I mean, I would have thought that Macron, if there is something very embarrassing to him in Azovstal, he would not want it out before those elections are out of the way, especially with the polls tightening in France.
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah.
Look, on Telegram, I have passed along completely unconfirmed and unsubstantiated reports. I'm going to leave it at that. But they are unconfirmed. But a lot of circumstantial evidence is piling up in that direction.
Yes.
And so it's something is there. By the way, Pepe Escobar, I don't know if you guys follow him on Twitter. Pepe Escobar is a Asian commentator, journalist. He's a very smart man, and he's usually right on the money. And he has heard that there's something going on in Azovstal itself that will blow people away. He's not one to hit the red panic button for no reason. But he was he had that Cheshire look to him, like he knows something already. So we're gonna find out,
We are going to find out.
Hopefully.
Yeah, I was going to say, but certainly this has added an element of intrigue to this. I'm very, very sorry, guys, but I do.
Let's go. Let's go. All right, thank you, everybody that's caught us on Odyssey.
Pleasure to speak with you,
Gonzalo. Great to have you here with us. Alexander. Thank you to everyone that's watched us on Odyssey, Rumble, YouTube, and our locals community. Thank you to our moderators. I saw Valley SGEC, Lady Cosmica, Reckless Abandon, Alan Watson, Zarael, Spartan Warrior Queen. I think I got everybody that was moderating. Thank you to our moderators and to everyone that sent us super chats real quick. All your questions on locals and super chats, we will answer those in a separate video dedicated to answering those questions. We put some of those questions up on the screen as well and those comments as well as we were streaming. Thank you, Gonzalo, once again.